I stared at the foreclosure notice, my fully paid-off home listed in 12-point type like a criminal on a wanted poster, and saw my own signature on a reverse mortgage I never signed, the loops too tight and the slant too left. My daughter had drained $190,000 of equity, bought herself a condo 6 states away, and left me with 30 days to vacate the house I'd owned free and clear for 12 years. By the time I finished, she was living in my spare bedroom, serving my breakfast at exactly 8 in the morning, and making court-ordered restitution payments at the same bank counter where she'd deposited my stolen equity. Let me tell you exactly how an accounts payable supervisor used 10-column ledger sheets and a dead husband's paranoia to flip the entire script. My name is Margaret, and at 57 I had spent 23 years balancing every invoice, every expense report at a mid-size hospital, so I knew the shape of a fraudulent signature before I finished my morning coffee. I could spot a transposed digit in a 12-digit account string from across a conference table. My late husband Tom was a quiet architect, the kind who built our house with his own hands and added a safe room behind a false wall in the basement, and when cancer took him 8 years ago he left me with a paid-off mortgage and a whisper that still echoed in my ears. Trust the numbers, never the charm. Our only child Jenna was the golden girl who wanted for nothing, private college paid from my double shifts, wedding covered by cashing a small life insurance policy that Tom had meant for a backyard greenhouse. She married Derek, a real estate agent with a 10-minute tan and a habit of using words like synergy while looking at your house like a comp sheet. I'd always sensed a small, cold ledger ticking behind Derek's smile, the way he'd ask about square footage and tax assessments at Thanksgiving dinner instead of watching the game. Last April, a certified letter from Summit Federal Bank was stuck to my storm door with a red final notice stamp, the adhesive so strong it peeled a strip of paint when I tugged it free. Inside, a 2-page notice of intent to foreclose on my property due to default under the terms of a home equity conversion mortgage. A reverse mortgage line of credit originated 7 months earlier. The loan account number ended in 4,419, the principal limit was listed as $240,000, and an initial draw of $190,000 had been disbursed on October 14th. The grounds for acceleration were unpaid property taxes for the full tax year and a failure to maintain the property as a primary residence according to a drive-by inspection. The letter said I had until May 21st to cure the default or the entire balance, now $198,000 with fees, would become due in full and the property sold at sheriff's sale. My house, my paid-off house. I stood at the kitchen island with the letter shaking in my hand, and I felt the floor tilt slightly, the way Tom's side of the bed still dipped if I rolled too far left. I set the letter flat on the counter, grabbed my reading glasses and a yellow legal pad, and wrote down every number like an audit checklist. The phone call to Summit's Mortgage Servicing Center took 41 minutes. I recorded the call automatically, a habit from work where every vendor dispute had to be documented. The woman in the loss mitigation department, a patient voice named Gloria with a soft Carolina accent, verified the last 4 of my social, then read back the recorded loan details. The application was submitted online September 2nd. The closing took place via a mobile notary at my home address October 14th, and the funds were wired to a newly opened Summit checking account in the name of the Maple Lane Trust, which listed a Margaret Ann Kellerman as grantor and a Derek H. Phelps as trustee. I told her I never applied for any such loan. She went silent and I heard the clicking of a keyboard then. "Ma'am, we have a copy of your driver's license, your signature and the notary seal. Are you telling me this is fraud?" I said, "I'm telling you to freeze every transaction on that trust account and send me the complete origination packet by overnight mail." The packet arrived in a thick manila envelope that I had to sign for. I spread the documents across my dining room table, a table Tom had built from reclaimed barn oak, and I arranged them in the order of a mortgage closing file. The HUD-1 settlement statement, the uniform residential loan application, the adjustable rate note, the deed of trust with a meets and bounds description matching my lot, and the certificate of acknowledgement from a notary named Patricia Dunway. I'd processed hundreds of closing packages when the hospital refinanced its medical office building, so I knew where to look. The signature page held a scrawl that looked like my name written by someone gripping the pen too high, the leading stroke on the M missing, the T in Margaret crossed halfway up the ascender. My signature has a distinct flat-bottomed G that looks like a number 8 with a broken loop, the result of a childhood habit my 4th grade teacher called the lazy cursive, And this forgery had a single rounded circle like a tight balloon. A forensic document examiner would later testify, using a digital microscope and a grid overlay, that it was a clumsy freehand simulation, with hesitation marks where the forger had paused to study my genuine signature from an old holiday card. The notary stamp had a raised seal, but the commission number belonged to a notary in Nevada, not Ohio, and the expiration date had passed 6 months before the closing. The notary journal entry had a thumbprint that was too perfect, no visible ridge endings or bifurcations, a photocopy of a photocopy. I took photos of everything with my phone, then called the county recorder's office. Sure enough, a deed of trust had been filed against my property in October. I drove down, paid the copy fee in cash, and got a certified copy. The grantor's signature was the same forgery, the same missing lead stroke. Armed with that, I walked into my local Summit branch to speak with the branch manager about a possible elder fraud case. I still believed, in some naive corner of my heart, that it was an outside scam, that my daughter could not be involved. Before I could get past the lobby's faux marble columns, Jenna and Derek pulled up in their new leased Mercedes, a gleaming metallic silver sedan with paper plates that still had the dealer's protective plastic on the floor mats. Jenna rushed toward me with that soft, doe-eyed look that had gotten her out of every failed exam and fender bender since she was 16. "Mom, we heard something terrible happened. You should have called us first." Derek stood behind her, hands in his designer jeans, scanning the bank's ceiling height and the teller stations like he was measuring for a listing. By the time we got back to my house, they had a script ready. They would handle the bank, they said. I was in no condition to fight a faceless corporation. What I needed was to sign a limited durable power of attorney so Derek could communicate with the lender and negotiate a loan modification. I needed to rest, and wouldn't it be easier if I came to stay with them in Florida just for a few months while the legal dust settled? Derek even used the word synergy 4 times in 15 minutes. I saw the play. Get me out of the house, get my signature on a POA, and they could drain whatever was left, maybe even sell the place before the foreclosure clock ran out. The POA document they slid across the kitchen island was 23 pages of dense legal boilerplate, and I spotted a clause buried on page 17 that would allow Derek to convey, encumber, or hypothecate any real property in my name without further consent. But I played foggy. I rubbed my temples, said my head felt full of cotton, told them I wanted to sleep on it. That night I barely slept. I stood in Tom's study, a room I hadn't changed since he died, with his blueprints still rolled in a corner and his old drafting pencils in a chipped coffee mug. I noticed Jenna had been through the desk. The bottom drawer was unlocked, the hanging files slightly askew, the tabs not in their usual order. A small wooden cigar box that had always sat on the left corner of the credenza, a box that had held his father's war medals, was gone. I felt a cold wash of panic and then a deeper anger. I searched the kitchen trash, moving aside coffee filters and a balled-up receipt, and there it was underneath a banana peel. She'd called it junk and tossed it. I wiped it clean with a paper towel, opened the brass latch and lifted the felt lining. Glued to the bottom was a single brass safety deposit key stamped Summit Bank, Box 214, and a folded piece of Tom's letterhead. I unfolded it with shaking hands. His handwriting was so familiar I could hear his voice, the slight hitch in the way he looped his capital letters. "Maggie, if you're reading this, something has forced you into my study against your will. This key will open a box I kept secret from everyone, including our daughter. Inside, you'll find a trust instrument I recorded in 2014. I knew the look she gave your checkbook when she thought we weren't watching. Do not trust a single promise from Jenna or anyone she marries. Use the box, save yourself." I didn't cry. I pressed the key into my palm until it left an indentation and I started designing my countermove. The key was warm and heavy, and I slipped it into the hidden pocket of my wallet, the one with a zipper I'd never used. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that family and finances should never mix without ironclad proof. Now back to the day I became my daughter's worst nightmare. I agreed to move to Florida. I packed a single suitcase with clothes for a short visit, and a hidden pocket containing the cigar box key, the foreclosure packet, and the printed county record. My neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, a retired legal secretary with a sharp eye and a filing system that could rival the county courthouse, promised to forward my mail and keep an eye on the house. I gave her a signed letter authorizing her to open any official-looking envelopes and text me photos. 3 days later, I was in a beige guest room in their 2-bedroom condo near a golf course in Naples, a property that, I would later prove, was purchased for $345,000, with a cash deposit of $180,000 that traced directly back to the wired reverse mortgage proceeds. The guest room had a bed with a floral comforter that smelled of fabric softener and a single window facing a maintenance shed. For the first week I shuffled around in a cardigan, asked the same questions twice, let them think the stress had shorted out my mind. I'd pause mid-sentence, lose my train of thought, and apologize with a quaver. I started a mental ledger of every red flag, which I later transferred to a tiny notepad hidden inside a tampon box. Derek took frantic phone calls in the garage, his voice muffled but leaking words like cash flow gap and Riffy fell through, and the hard money guy wants 12%. I'd press a glass to the wall that separated the laundry room from the garage to catch them. Jenna dodged calls from a number with a 614 Ohio area code. One afternoon I answered her ringing cell phone on the kitchen counter before she could grab it, and a man said he was from Summit's Asset Recovery Unit, asking about a Miss Jenna Miller. I said wrong number and hung up, and when Jenna snatched the phone away, her face blanched under her spray tan. She spent 20 minutes in the bathroom with the fan on, and I could hear her crying angry, sharp sobs, not grief but frustration. Their spending was a rolling disaster that unfolded in plain sight if you knew how to read receipts. I found a stack of store charge slips in the kitchen trash, a $900 dinner at a steakhouse, a spa day costing $700, a jewelry store charge for a tennis bracelet, all dated within the last 3 months. Their visa statement arrived in the mail while they were out, and I steamed it open over a pot of boiling water using an old trick Mrs. Delgado had taught me. Minimum payment due, $4,200. Total outstanding balance, $47,000. Cash advances, 8 separate withdrawals of $500 each, all in the same month. They were hemorrhaging money and using my stolen equity like a tourniquet that was about to snap. They kept a locked filing cabinet in the walk-in closet of the master bedroom, a 2-drawer sentry safe with a tubular key lock. I noticed Derek kept the key on a carabiner clipped to his belt loop. So I waited for a Saturday when they had a doubles match at the club, and I let myself into their bedroom with a butter knife wedged between the door frame and the strike plate. They hadn't locked the bedroom door because they thought I was too foggy to find the hallway. I rummaged through the closet, pushing aside shoeboxes and belts, and found a spare key ring in a shoebox of old receipts, a small silver key that matched the cabinet's lock. I didn't steal it. I took a photo with my phone, making sure the lighting showed the teeth clearly, and later that week I walked to a hardware store and had them cut me a duplicate from the photo, telling them I'd lost the original to my filing cabinet. The clerk, a young man with a nose ring, didn't bat an eye. He just slid the blank key into the cutter and handed me the duplicate for $4 and change. The cabinet was a gold mine, hanging files with color-coded tabs that Derek must have organized, because Jenna never filed anything in her life. Behind a folder labeled Tax 2019, I found the original master file for the Maple Lane Trust. It contained a signed trust agreement that looked authentic, naming Derek as trustee with full power to disburse funds, but my signature as grantor was the same forgery from the reverse mortgage, the missing M stroke and the balloon G. There was a photocopy of an Ohio driver's license with my name and address but Jenna's photo, the hair darkened with a cheap drugstore dye, and a pair of my old reading glasses perched on her nose. The fraud was so crude I almost laughed, but my throat was too dry. A notary journal entry from Patricia Dunway was clipped to the back, with a thumbprint that didn't match mine. I know because I have a scar through my right thumbprint from a kitchen knife accident 20 years ago that splits the ridge pattern into 2 distinct whorls. The fake thumbprint was a smooth oval, no scar, no ridge detail at all, just a smudged photocopy of someone else's thumb. I also found the closing documents for the condo, a settlement statement from a Florida title company showing the source of funds as wire from Summit bank account ending 4419, exactly the trust account. Underneath that, a promissory note from Derek to a hard money lender for $150,000, signed 3 weeks after they drained my equity, meaning they'd overextended and were already borrowing against the condo to cover their lifestyle. Their credit card statements showed minimum payments barely covering interest and a Visa bill from a recent trip to the Bahamas. The walls were closing in on them, and I was the only source of refinancing leverage. They needed me to sign something that would unlock more money or transfer the house outright. That evening the garbage disposal jammed, a grinding screech that filled the kitchen. Derek stood over the sink jabbing a wooden spoon into the drain, his face red. He muttered about calling a plumber and how much it would cost. I asked if he needed help and he snapped, What would you know about it? I walked over, reached under the sink to unplug the unit, then pulled out the wrench from my purse, a compact adjustable wrench I'd carried since my father died. I removed the trap, a U-shaped PVC pipe, and pulled out a wine opener and a tangled hair clip that had been chewing the blades. My father was a master plumber, and I spent my teenage summers hauling his toolbox through crawl spaces, learning how to clear a P-trap, how to sweat copper joints, and how to read a plumbing schematic. The disposal hummed back to life. Derek stared. Jenna said, "Well, look at you, Mom." I said nothing, but that moment shifted my cover. They started treating me like a curious old lady with a few hidden skills, not a threat, and that gave me more freedom to move. After that, I was allowed to tinker around the condo without suspicion. I began piecing together shredded documents from the kitchen trash. Their shredder was a cheap crosscut model that left strips about a 1/4 inch wide, and I'd pull out strips of paper stuck with coffee grounds, soak them in a bowl of lukewarm water to separate the fibers, then press them dry on the bathroom tile, and tape them together with Scotch tape I bought in secret. It took me 4 days to reconstruct 3 critical pages. Reconstructed page 1. A Summit Bank Trust account statement showing the initial deposit of $190,000 and subsequent debits to a title company for the condo deposit, a car dealership for the Mercedes lease buyout, and several cashier's check to self for $5,000 each, totaling $35,000 siphoned in small batches to evade reportable transaction limits. Reconstructed page 2. A notice from the Collier County property appraiser that the condo's homestead exemption had been flagged because the property was not owner-occupied, since they were trying to claim it as primary residence, but had another address on file in Ohio. Reconstructed page 3. A letter from a forensic accountant they'd consulted about moving the trust assets into an offshore account in Grand Cayman, with a handwritten note in Derek's scrawl saying, M must sign QDRO-style release to bypass trust restriction. A QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Order, is a legal tool used to divide retirement accounts in divorce, and the fact that Derek thought it could be repurposed to steal my house told me he was desperate and reckless. That was the moment I understood Tom's full plan. I needed to get to his safety deposit box. But I needed a plausible reason to leave the condo for several hours. The opportunity came when Jenna scheduled a hair appointment, and Derek had to show an open house in a gated community 40 minutes away. I waited until their cars pulled out, then grabbed my purse and walked half a mile to the nearest bus stop. I took a local bus to the Summit branch in downtown Naples, the same branch where my stolen funds had first landed, a building with tinted glass and a vault visible through the lobby. I presented the brass key and my genuine Ohio driver's license. The vault manager, a woman named Iris with silver hair and a name tag that read Iris 17 years, took me to a small private room with a polished wood table and a camellia in a ceramic pot. Box 214 was a long steel drawer that she slid out and placed on the table before leaving me alone. I slid back the lid. Inside was a manila envelope with Tom's handwriting, "To my wife in case of emergency." My hands were steady, a small miracle. Inside, a letter and a certified copy of a recorded trust document with the county recorder's embossed seal. The letter explained that in 2014, after Jenna had been caught forging Tom's name on a tuition check during her sophomore year, Tom had consulted an estate attorney and created a protective trust that encumbered our home. The trust was a defective grantor trust with a very specific poison pill. Any mortgage or lien on the property would require my physical presence at the county courthouse or a Summit Bank branch with a live-streamed notarization, plus the recitation of a specific verbal phrase known only to me and stored in the bank's secure records as a knowledge-based authentication key. The phrase was chestnut and rain, the first line of a poem Tom had written me on our 10th anniversary. If those conditions weren't met, the trust would automatically void the transaction and revert full title to me, with Summit Bank liable for any unauthorized encumbrances processed in violation. Tom had filed a memorandum of trust with the county recorder, a 1-page document that flagged the title but did not reveal the trust's full terms, which placed a cloud on the title that any competent title company should have caught. The reverse mortgage lender, in their rush to close and earn the origination fee, had ignored the recorded memorandum or never checked, making the loan technically void from inception. Tom had set a dead man's switch with the very bank that now faced a massive liability for failing to honor its own trust department's recorded documents. I made copies of everything using the branch copier, left the originals in the box, and called the number on a sticky note Iris gave me for elder fraud concerns. That connected me to Diane Koenig, a senior compliance officer at Summit's corporate division in Ohio. Her voice was crisp and fast, the voice of someone who had spent years untangling mortgage fraud. I told her my story in exactly 7 minutes. She flew down the next day and met me at a coffee shop with outdoor seating where the noise of traffic would cover our conversation. Over 3 hours and 2 parts of tea, we built a timeline. She confirmed that the notary seal was from a revoked commission, that the driver's license copy had been flagged by their automated identity verification system, but overridden by a loan officer named Bradley Swenson, who was now under internal investigation for a pattern of similar overrides. She also confirmed that the trust memorandum had been filed correctly, but the title search company, a third-party vendor Summit used, had missed it due to a data entry error in the legal description. They'd searched Lot 17 instead of Lot 17A. Diane said the bank would fully cooperate with criminal prosecution if I could get admissions on tape. She gave me a small audio recorder disguised as a hearing aid battery pack, a device the size of a quarter that clipped onto my bra strap and could record for 12 hours. She walked me through the activation button, a subtle press through fabric, and we practiced until I could start and stop it without looking. We set a plan. I would provoke a direct conversation about the documents, and she would coordinate with local law enforcement to be nearby when the trap snapped shut. I returned to the condo and began wearing the device every day, speaking only in casual tones to build a baseline of innocent chatter. But before the final act, I needed to know one thing. Was my daughter capable of watching me die if it meant getting what she wanted? I staged a medical scare. I waited until Derek was out at a networking lunch, and Jenna was on the phone in the kitchen, her back to the living room. I crumpled on the living room floor, clawing at my chest, gasping, my face contorted in what I hoped looked like cardiac distress. I let my body go slack, half-lidded eyes, the whole performance. I'd practiced in the bathroom mirror, watching my own reflection to make sure my breathing looked shallow and my fingers curled convincingly. Jenna hung up the phone. I heard her footsteps approach, pause on the tile. She didn't drop to her knees. She didn't call 911. She stepped over my torso, careful not to touch me, her sandal brushing my sleeve, and walked directly to the side table by the sofa. She unzipped my purse and pulled out the manila envelope I'd left there, the one containing a dummy corrective deed that supposedly would transfer the house into the trust permanently. She flipped through it, and I saw her shadow fall across the pages. Then she stood over me, phone to her ear, and said in a flat, business-like voice, "Derek, she's down. Get the mobile notary here now. If she's unconscious, we can get a hospital notary to authorize an emergency power. This is our window." She nudged my shoulder with her foot. I felt the sole of her sandal press into my arm, not hard enough to bruise, but enough to check if I was faking. I waited a full 90 seconds, counting my own pulse in my ears, then groaned and came to. I said I must have fainted from low sugar. Jenna played the doting daughter instantly, brought me orange juice, fluffed a pillow behind my head, and texted Derek to stand down. That night I stared at the ceiling and let the last thread of motherly sentiment snap like a rubber band. I had nursed this woman through chickenpox and broken hearts, and now she had stepped over my body to steal my house. 2 days later, Derek announced that we had an appointment at Summit Bank's branch office to sign the final resolution documents. He'd hired a notary, a woman I recognized from Jenna's book club, a small brunette with nervous hands. The drive over was full of soothing lies. "Once you sign, the foreclosure goes away, the house stays in the family, and you can live with us forever, Mom." I nodded softly and clutched my purse. Inside, along with the hearing aid recorder which I had activated with a subtle press as I got into the car, I had a photocopy of Tom's letter, the county trust memorandum, and my genuine notarized affidavit from Diane confirming the trust's validity. The branch was small, with a conference room just past the teller line, a room with frosted glass and a single painting of a beach sunset. The notary sat at the head of the table with a stamp and a journal, her ink pad already open. Derek slid a document across the polished oak, a restated irrevocable trust authorization that purported to ratify the original reverse mortgage and grant Derek full authority to manage all trust assets, including the power to sell the house and invest the proceeds. It required my signature and a notarized acknowledgement. I put on my reading glasses and read every line, taking my time, noting that it referenced the forged reverse mortgage by loan number, affirming that I had knowingly applied and received the funds. It also contained an indemnification clause that would shield Derek and Jenna from any future fraud claims. I looked up at my daughter. She was smiling, but her knuckles were white on the armrest, her wedding ring digging into her finger. I said, "I won't sign this." Jenna's smile flickered. "Mom, you have to, it's the only way to save the house." I said, "The house is already saved, you just don't know it yet. The bank knows about the forgery, Jenna. They know about the fake notary stamp and the driver's license with your picture on it. They also know about the protective trust your father set up before he died. The one that requires me to say Chestnut and Rain to validate any lien. You didn't know that phrase, did you? Dad never shared it with you." I pressed the button on my recorder to stop, ensuring the last few minutes were saved. Derek lunged across the table to grab the papers, knocking over the notary's ink pad, but behind me the door opened, and Diane Koenig walked in with two plainclothes detectives in department store blazers, and a uniformed Collier County deputy with his hand resting on his holster. "Margaret, you can stop now." Jenna stood up, her face twisting through confusion, rage, and that familiar performance of victimhood I'd seen since she was a teenager caught cheating on a history exam. "This is a mistake. She's confused, she has early onset. You can't believe her." Diane set a folder on the table. It was thick with tabs, each one a piece of evidence. The forensic document examiner's report with the grid overlays and hesitation analysis, the revoked notary commission from Nevada, the falsified photo ID with the mismatched hair color, the bank's internal audit showing that Bradley Swenson had overridden the ID flag. "We have your mother's original signature samples from 20 years of bank records, plus a certified statement from Patricia Dunway, the real Patricia Dunway who confirmed her seal was stolen 3 years ago. We have the recording of your discussion about the emergency power, and we have the audio from the last 10 minutes, including your mother's refusal to sign." Derek bolted for the door, but the deputy blocked him with a casual sidestep. The detectives read Jenna her rights, the Miranda warning falling flat in the silent room. As they handcuffed her, she twisted to look at me, and for a split second I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. Then it was gone. I spoke the line that would later appear in the police report, the one I had rehearsed into my bathroom mirror until it lost all emotion. "You thought you could steal my home and my name, but you forgot that I taught you how to balance a checkbook. Now you'll learn how to repay a debt." The legal fallout was precise and surgical. Summit Bank, facing regulatory penalties from the OCC for its oversight, agreed to a settlement that covered all my legal fees, compensated me $220,000 for emotional distress and the bank's negligence, and immediately released the fraudulent deed of trust. The reverse mortgage was declared void, a legal nullity from the date of origination, and the property was restored to my name free and clear with a clean title. My neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, had been paying the back property taxes from an emergency fund I'd left, so the tax default was cured before the sheriff's sale deadline. The condo in Naples was seized under Florida's civil forfeiture statute as the fruit of a criminal enterprise, and sold at auction with the proceeds, $52,000 after the bank's lien, applied to restitution. Jenna and Derek were both charged. Derek pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and grand theft, receiving 5 years in state prison. I watched him at the sentencing hearing, his tan faded and his designer jeans replaced by an orange jumpsuit, and I felt nothing but a dull satisfaction. Jenna, as the primary architect of the identity theft, was convicted after a 3-day trial at which I testified with my 10-column ledger of evidence laid out like a board presentation, each entry cross-referenced to an exhibit number. Her attorney tried to paint me as a bitter old woman with fuzzy memory, but the forensic document examiner's testimony about the G-loop and the hesitation marks was unshakable, and the jury returned a guilty verdict in 2 hours. Her sentence, 4 years with suspended time after 6 months served in county jail and 5 years of probation, subject to a very specific creative condition proposed by the prosecutor and approved by a judge who had a reputation for poetic justice. Because Jenna had no remaining assets and no means to pay the court-ordered restitution of $190,000 plus interest, totaling over $220,000, the judge imposed a restitution plan combined with a monitored guardianship arrangement. Jenna was required to reside at my home as my live-in caregiver, at no cost to me, but with her time valued at Florida minimum wage, all income beyond basic subsistence applied to the debt, supervised by a court monitor with unannounced home visits. Any violation, any missed payment, any hint of financial misconduct would trigger immediate incarceration for the full 4 years. The judge looked over his glasses at Jenna and said, "You wanted to take care of your mother, now you will under a microscope. So now, every weekday morning, Jenna brings me coffee at exactly 8 o'clock. She prepares my meals according to my dietary instructions, a low-sodium regimen I've needed since Tom's passing, and she vacuums the living room where the cigar box now sits on the mantel as a permanent exhibit. She drives me to my book club meetings and waits in the car, not allowed inside. She is not permitted to handle any financial documents, not even a grocery receipt, without my countersignature. Once a month on the first Monday, I walk with her to the very same Summit Bank branch where her car collapsed. She stands at the teller window, the same counter where the trust account was first opened, and deposits a cashier's check for the month's restitution payment, right under the same vault camera that recorded the original fraudulent wire. I sit in a leather chair in the lobby and watch, and I think about Tom and his cigar box and the way he'd tap his pencil against his temple when he was solving a design problem. He once told me that a house built with integrity will stand even when the foundation is tested. I never imagined the wrecking ball would be my own daughter, but the trust he built, both the legal one and the one between us, held fast. I live in the same paid-off house, my house, with a clearer eye than I've ever had. I don't hate Jenna. I don't love her the same way either. But I do believe in balance, and her presence every day is a living ledger row with a running total that will take years to settle. She knows I'm watching, and I know she's counting the days until her probation ends. Maybe when the debt is paid, we'll find a new equation, or maybe not. Numbers don't lie, and neither do mothers who have learned to read the fine print. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments below. If you believe that no one should get away with stealing a lifetime of work, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of family betrayal and hard-won justice. Until next time, guard your signature and your trust.